Retro.
Hi, this is Fred Tatasciore, and you're listening to Dennis and Jay on Podcast Stardust. The Force is strong with both of them.
Welcome to Podcast Stardust. This is the fully armed and operational podcast dedicated to Star Wars news, reviews, and discussion. I'm Dennis Keithley.
And I'm Jay Krebs.
We are getting back into our Star Wars The Clone Wars rewatch with a look at episode 5 from season 2 of The Clone Wars. But before we get into that, Jay, where can we be found around the internet?
All right, Dennis, we are easily found on Facebook and Instagram at Podcast Stardust.
All right, the dish is aligned, the signal's boosted to maximum output, the shield is down. We are now broadcasting to the galaxy. So this will be our discussion again of episode 5. Season 2 of The Clone Wars is called Landing at Point Rain. Very, very action-packed episode. Full spoilers. If you haven't seen it, that's on you. Jay, you want to go ahead and give us the summary of this episode, please?
This is a classic. The Jedi and the Republic launch an invasion of Geonosis to stop Poggle the Lesser and the Geonosians from rebuilding their droid army. Despite a well-organized plan to get their armies to the surface, the Jedi and the clones experience great losses. 3 different armies led by Obi-Wan Kenobi, Ki-Adi-Mundi, and Anakin Skywalker fight their way across the surface to a designated landing zone and then destroy the shield generator protecting a new Geonosian droid foundry, which sets up a fight to come with the Geonosians.
Yeah, so we're getting a whole string of episodes here devoted to what's going on in Geonosis, and they're really good. It's a great little series, and it's the most kind of like episodic we get with this, the things going on in a battle for a while in the Clone Wars. It's really great. Before I get into your opinions on this episode overall, I just want to talk a bit of some of the stuff that Dave Filoni talked about in the episode feature out of this, which will kind of help set up our entire discussion. And Dave talked about how George Lucas intended this episode to be a D-Day style attack on Geonosis. And he went on to describe himself as the Darth Vader of the Clone Wars production team, and George Lucas was the Emperor. And they had been working on this episode, and George just kind of showed up and blew it all apart because it wasn't what exactly he wanted. And so what they did is they created a reel that mocked up different things that we've seen in Star Wars, different stuff from various war movies, World War II movies and the like, to establish the feel and what they were going for in this episode. And Dave caps off this entire discussion by saying that, we just on the Senate Spy. And so all the bottled, we didn't blow up stuff in Senate Spy, that comes out and landing at Point Rain. And he's not wrong in a major way. We talked about last week how in Senate Spy, no one fires a blaster, no one ignites a lightsaber, and nothing explodes. All of those things happen 100 times over in this episode in a major way. So now that I've said all of that, what do you think about this episode overall?
Yeah, well, first of all, that was one of the first things that I thought of was, when you're like, boy, there was none of this, none of that. And we definitely got a lot of it. So, okay, this episode is, when you think about some of the more, like I said, legendary episodes from the Clone Wars, this one always comes up. And I feel like for a lot of fans, it's because it is going right back to where it all started in the fact that we're getting back to Geonosis, where the clones made their debut in Attack of the Clones. And so there's this really like heavy like lore kind of along with that I think really resonates with a lot of fans. But as far as the full scale assault here on Geonosis, it is, as you said, it's so action packed. And it's a brutal, intense campaign. And there's a great, basically like this is the introduction of Rex really as a prominent character. as, key to this episode. And yeah, I mean, we've gotten him here and there, but I mean, he really does a lot here. And I mean, the clones are facing lots of heavy resistance, and it's so action packed, and there's just such a strategic element to this. And I just love seeing everybody in action. And it's just like one of those things where you almost want to slow it down, like when you see some of those things where it's like, the explosion, and then the group is like walking off, from the explosion kind of thing. It kind of gives you that epic just feeling. And I just think that the animation itself was just top notch in this one. It was such a good episode. But what about you?
Well, yeah, I mean, after the Clone Wars movie, this is like one of the key episodes that puts the wars in the Clone Wars when it comes down to it. I mean, and don't get me wrong, I love so many different episodes of the Clone Wars, but a lot of them don't feature a big battle of any kind in this one. But when George Lucas intended this to be a D-Day style attack, mission accomplished in this one. I mean, it is a massive invasion with massive losses and an ultimate victory, but they paid for it on the way there with the number of clones that they lost and the things that they had to do to get there. Now, they did it in a PG way compared to something like, say, Saving Private Ryan, but we still got to see a lot of clones go down. We got to see a number of gunships blown up, tanks blown up, Geonosians destroyed, caught in flame, and flamethrowers there. I mean, this episode's pushing a PG-13 at the very least when it's all said and done, as far as a rating goes. But it's simply fantastic. I know this was a very influential episode for my boys. I mean, I remember seeing them set up their Clone Wars action figures with the clones and Jedi, like going into a cave to fight Geonosians. And, like we get to see in this and this one. So again, this is a very, very pivotal episode here. Lots of things that happen. And so we kind of mentioned it in the summary here. We've got Obi-Wan Kenobi, Ki-Adi-Mundi, and Anakin Skywalker leading 3 different divisions from different directions, basically to divide up the attention of the Geonosians and make it possible for them to try and all get through to this landing zone before they can push forward towards the shield generator, which will make it possible to land more troops and then eventually take out this droid foundry. The last episode we talked about with Rush Clovis and the banking clan kind of funding a new droid foundry on Geonosis. They don't explicitly say it anywhere, but I feel like this is the droid foundry from that episode that they were talking about.
No, I totally agree with you.
Yeah.
For sure.
And so that was, that kind of brings that episode into the same arc in its own way. But again, it doesn't take place on Geonosis. But so there's that. Obi-Wan is assisted by Commander Cody, and then he's also got Waxer and Boyle. So it's good to see them make their return.
So good. Yes.
Yeah.
With
and then we've
Numa
got
on the one helmet. Did you catch that?
Oh yeah, that was fantastic. But I mean, I didn't realize it was them at first because they're wearing a different style armor.
Right. Yes. Until he names them. Yeah.
Exactly. And then because Cody has to send those 2 to get Obi-Wan because his landing craft, his gunship had been shot down. Boy, why couldn't I say that easily? We got Ki-Adi-Mundi again. He's in charge. He's got Commander Jet, who's a new clone for us. They all get shot down on their way to Geonosis, but they all survive. And then we've got Anakin, of course, with Ahsoka and Captain Rex. So, that's the plan. We can talk about all their missions in a minute. This episode is also full of great one-liners here. And when they're going over the plan and Anakin and Obi-Wan are kind of they got some banter going back and forth about who's going to get there first and stuff like that, which is funny because Obi-Wan has just kind of made a sarcastic remark to Anakin and Ahsoka after they were comparing their kill totals from the previous mission. He's like, I'm glad this could be so entertaining for you. And then they're kind of talking about who's going to get there first, who's faster than Luminara, who's not even there in person, chimes in, gentlemen, if you are quite finished, we have a battle to begin.
I love that. She's like the mom in this. That was great.
And then that's followed up with, as they are getting ready to board their LAAT, whatever you want to call them, ships, Obi-Wan's talking to Cody, who was not there at the original Battle of Geonosis and Attack of the Clones. And so Obi-Wan's talking about it, and he says, last time I was here, pulling that part, I was chained to a pole and attacked by several giant monsters. Cody comes back and says, that sounds very entertaining. And Obi-Wan's response is, It was for the Geonosians. So I
Crack
had to
it
work
up.
my Obi-Wan voice in there. But
It was
again, just
nice.
some really fantastic lines right off the bat in this episode.
Definitely, definitely. So, we've also often talked about well-placed humor, and this
Uh-huh.
is definitely it because it was not cheesy. It was perfectly placed, and it was bringing in some, real key moments from a lot of different things. And, as far as the Attack of the Clones references and stuff is what I'm talking about here. But yeah, it was good. It was all good.
Well, and the other thing about the humor, to follow up on your point there, is that again, it's the appropriate level of Star Wars humor. It's not the slapstick stuff that we typically get with Jar Jar, which can be appropriate Star Wars humor. Or one of the things that you and I objected so much to in Resistance was some of the goofy humor that they put into that animated series. But here, the humor is like what we're accustomed to seeing from soldiers in various war movies. They got a job to do, but one of the ways they get through it is by telling these jokes and this banter between them
Right.
here. And even Obi-Wan just kind of reflecting on that prior battle. It's this maudlin moment here. And he's coming back to some place that was absolutely brutal in its experience. And, he reflects on it briefly, but then he gets down to work on it. So again, it was a nice touch.
Yep. No, I totally agree.
Okay, let's start off with Ki-Adi-Mundi, because that's who I have next in the notes. So they get shot down short of the landing zone, and then he has to get his ATTEs across the terrain, and he has to get through a cave, and it's just like one obstacle over another. I didn't appreciate this enough in my first couple of viewings, but the Geonosians had sowed the path towards their shield generator with all these giant obstacles that they knew the ATTs couldn't just march through.
Mhm.
So Ki-Adi-Mundi's like cutting him down with a lightsaber so his forces can get through. That wasn't even a touch they need to add this episode, but it was just kind of cool that they added that level of detail.
Yeah, especially because he was injured, from their
Uh-huh.
approach and their crash land on Geonosis itself. And, I just think that he was ideal in this and because we see him just making sure that like the clone units are in position before he advances and he's trying to reduce unnecessary casualties, type of thing. But he recognizes that these clones are actually more than just soldiers in a Republic army. He's calm, he's got this demeanor that suggests a respect for them clones,
Mhm.
and I thought that was amazing.
What did you think of the scenes when he led his men into the caves?
Oh, yeah, well, it showcases him as he shoulders that responsibility, but he does so with a sense of duty, you know what I
Uh-huh.
mean? So, I mean, I think there's a bigger picture that we need to get on Ki-Adi-Mundi, and I respect him even so much more after watching this episode again.
Yeah. Well, this is his debut in the Clone Wars, in
Mhm,
addition, because originally he was going to be in the first episode of the season, but they didn't have his artwork done yet. So they
mhm,
saved him and we introduced him here. But to your point, like when he gets into the caves, clearly he's looking out for his men, but he's
mhm,
also a general and he's got a mission to complete. And so
mhm.
even though the Geonosians like start off this whole fight by carrying away a clone, it's like, don't have time to dwell on that.
Right.
It's go forward. And
Mhm.
he calls up the clones with the flamethrowers to
Yeah.
unleash them on the Geonosians. And I'm not sure what I think about that. It's the look, I mean, it's war, people die, and the Jedi have accepted this role as generals in this war, but there's something about a brutality of a flamethrower. That's
Mhm.
a hell of a way to die.
Mhm, it really is. And, to your point too, I think about much, much later when we actually get to meet a specific Geonosian, and that's I believe isn't that in Rebels that we get to do that?
Yeah,
Yeah. So,
yeah,
it and so thinking back or thinking forward to that and then thinking about this is like, "Ooh, yeah, that is pretty brutal."
uh-huh. And then we'll skip ahead to Obi-Wan. So he takes the worst of it. His forces get shot down, or his ship gets shut down short of the landing zone, but a lot of his forces there, and they set up a perimeter. But he takes quite an injury. He has to be helped out of this gunship by Waxer and Boyle. Everyone on the gunship but him and one other clone died in the crash.
Mhm.
And they just face onslaught after onslaught of Geonosians. there, with their droids on the surface, and they're just doing everything they can to hold out on that one. Incredible, incredible scenes.
Yeah, it really is. And that's one thing honestly that I really appreciate about this episode is that you do get these three different generals and they're landing on three different parts of the approach paths and things like that. But they're not ultimately 100% unscathed. You know what I mean?
Right.
And so they have to take their lumps and it shows the realities of that. And even you see things like Obi-Wan's face is all scratched up and Ki-Adi-Mundi is hurt. And so it's just very realistic in that way that they are having to basically survive in the
Hmm.
face of all of this stuff. And even though they're Jedi, they're not immune to some of these types of effects of war.
Right. And it's an episode like this that really defines the Clone Wars as something other than your typical Saturday morning cartoon that we got
Yeah.
used to growing up in the 80s here. Nothing like this happens. That there's no grand battles in those cartoons, and the heroes aren't at any risk of perishing there. Their soldiers are going to find, they may fall into some trap, but they're going to find some clever way to get out of it, and everything's going to be fine. We're not going to see people perishing, the soldiers perishing in those battles and stuff like that. But this turns all of that on its head. This makes it Star Wars. This is a custom what we're
Mhm.
seeing in battles like the Battle of Hoth or the Battle of Endor, and the likes. There, what we got to see in Attack of the Clones and stuff like that. This episode really matches those movies there.
Oh, yeah. And you can just feel like the stakes are so
Oh yeah,
high through and and it's like you have to catch yourself almost and you're like, "Oh my gosh, this is an animated show," you know? But you're
yeah,
just right on the edge of your seat.
indeed, indeed. Okay, then the last prong of this is Anakin and Ahsoka with Rex's help leading their squad. And again, another classic line on this. As they're marching towards the landing zone, they come across this gigantic wall that turns out to be a fortress. They had seen this on the holomap before they left the acclimator destroyer that was in orbit. And Ahsoka points it out, and Anakin says, "Oh, don't worry about this. We're not going to be anywhere near that." And so they
Mm.
arrive at the wall, and they immediately come under heavy fire. And Ahsoka says to Anakin, "This is another fine mess you've gotten us into." And his retort is, "This isn't my fault. Besides, it was your responsibility to study the holy map." The way Ashley Eckstein voices this and the animation that goes with it is just so classic. She goes, "I did. Don't you remember? You said, 'Don't worry, Snips. We aren't going anywhere near that thing.'" And the
Yeah,
way Ahsoka's just kind of like she puts her hand on her chest and with her other hand she's wagging her finger. I
I
get a
love it.
good chuckle every single time I see that. That's the line I remember from this episode just about more than anything.
It's so classic, and again, it's also just classic Anakin and Ahsoka,
Yeah.
and that it's just their relationship in a nutshell right there.
Right. And this part of the episode is again putting aside the lightsabers and the blasters and stuff like that. Them getting up to the top of the fortress and destroying it is like the most Star Wars thing ever. Here,
Oh, yeah.
it's two Jedi who climb up the wall, are fighting off battle droids. Rex makes his way up there to help them out. A couple droidicas pop up and they take care of them like only Jedi and a clone trooper could. And then they throw the bombs into the wall. They throw Rex over the wall, leap
Yeah.
off of it, stop themselves with the Force, and then use the Force to catch him and land safely. She gives us another great line. Next time, just tell me to jump. Well, where would
Yes.
the fun be in that? Again, in the middle of a very brutal episode, we get a little bit more lighthearted Star Wars adventure,
Mhm.
which I think the episode needs that type of levity.
Oh, yeah. I mean, it's definitely there for balance because otherwise it would just be too much. As you
Yeah.
mentioned, for your typical Saturday morning animation that, some kids might be watching. I mean, you have to have that to counteract the brutality, and the intensity of this episode.
Yeah, definitely so. And it is a great scene. I'm glad they included it here. It also kind of reminded me of this wall with all the guns coming out of it. Which one of the episodes have we had it yet? Was it in season one or did it come later with the Delta Squad? Heavy Fives, Echo, and them, where
Oh,
they're in the training room
yeah, not
and they've
yet.
got that
Mhm.
wall with all the cannons. I guess we haven't had that one yet. It's hard to remember
Yep.
after this much
I
time,
know, especially when
but
everything gets all mushed together.
yeah, but this type of wall is something we'll see again in the Clone
Mhm.
Wars.
Mhm.
But finally, we get back to Obi-Wan Kenobi. They are about to be overrun by the Separatists, the tanks, the Geonosians, the droids, and everything else. And we've had this problem that they can't get air support because it's a planet-wide invasion, as Admiral Yaren tells Commander Jet at one point. But he finally scrounges up a squad, and these Y-wings come in at the last second, and just as Obi-Wan Kenobi is igniting his lightsaber for his last stand against all these this oncoming
Yeah.
army, the Y-wings save them. They bomb the tanks and the droids and the Geonosians, and they save the day there at the last
Yeah.
second. Great little victory whoop by the clones there. And immediately after that, Anakin and Ki-Adi-Mundi's forces catch up to him. So, great little sequence there.
Yeah, for sure. And, it doesn't feel like, a trope though that, oh, it's just in the nick of time. It was fitting for this episode for that to happen exactly when it did.
No, I wouldn't call it a trope at all. I'd call it an homage to the Army movies and the war movies that
Mhm.
they were drawing their inspiration from in
I like
this
that.
case.
Mhm.
Yeah,
Yep, I would agree.
because well, the expression on Obi-Wan's face when he's looking out over the battlefield, and he's just that grim determination, the way his jaw is set.
Yeah.
The animation only gets better with each successive season of the Clone Wars, and the Bad Batch makes all of this stuff look primitive by
Mhm.
comparison. But what they were able to capture in that look on Obi-Wan's face, just how grimy and dirty he looked,
Yep.
clearly injured, but how serious and determined he was in that moment. And then, just like the sense of relief you could see coming off of him when those Y-wings showed up and finish off the job was a really excellent moment
Yeah.
in this whole episode, which is full of excellent moments.
Right. And I mean, and it's almost uncharacteristic of Obi-Wan to almost look like he's not that he's lost hope, but that
Uh-huh.
he's just really ragged. I mean,
Yeah.
you didn't even see him looking that way even in Attack of the Clones. But I will say the only thing that would have made it better is if they would have used the animation to like mess up his hair. So, his hair was just too
Yeah, I think that's just kind of the what I'm saying there
the
is that
asset.
it's yeah, there's only so much they can
Exactly.
do with the model.
Right.
So
But they spent their investment on the facial expressions and like you said, just the artwork of the griminess and just the feeling that you get from just the overall desperation that was going on. I think it was very well spent in those areas.
yeah, we got 2 episodes back to back in which Obi-Wan has had an awesome facial expression. The last episode after Anakin's talking about not knowing about Clovis's past relationship with Padme,
Oh, yeah.
and after Yoda says, like, "Oh, you know about that? Why would you?" And the look on Obi-Wan's face, that just kind of raised
So
eyebrow.
good.
And then this episode, again, I'm right. He didn't lose hope, but it was just kind of an acceptance.
Mhm.
That grim
Mhm.
determination is that I'm gonna you know this is it. This may be it, and he
Yep.
accepts that because he's a Jedi. He's willing to become one with the Force if that's what it takes. He'll make that sacrifice there.
Exactly.
But that's not the end of the episode. We still have the charge on the shield generator here, and it's really kind of down to Anakin and Ahsoka at this point because of the injuries to Ki-Adi-Mundi and Obi-Wan Kenobi. And it is a mad dash across a
Yes.
battlefield with them deflecting blaster bolts with their lightsabers. Uh, the clones just firing at anything and everything. We got Geonosians flying off of some clones, explosions taking out clones. And what's great is that you'll see these Geonosians come on screen, and then something will take them off that also just comes onto screen. Or we start off focusing on Anakin, and then there's a Geonosian that's about to get the beat on him and his clones, and then all of a sudden Ahsoka shows up and takes it out. Doesn't break stride, just keeps running. She just kind of glances at it and keeps moving because that's all they can do is make that mad dash towards
Right.
the shield generator. Again, I mean, I don't want to overdo it. I feel like we heap tons and tons of praise on every episode of the Clone Wars, but just the level of action in this one is another level that we hadn't seen yet.
Oh, yeah, and I'm telling you what, there are some really epic shots in this last mad dash, as you called it. I mean, there's that really long shot of all of the like, Anakin and Ahsoka and all the clones just, like, charging at the Geonosians, and it's just that's the one that we were talking about reminded me of the couple of the scenes from the live action Ahsoka series as well. But I mean, that's just epic. I mean, just the animation in this and just again the world building on this is just so good.
You're actually bringing up the conversation that we had before we started
Right.
recording with the live action, which we did. And I'll let you touch on that just a bit, because it was the fifth season or the fifth episode of season 1 of Ahsoka, the Shadow Warrior episode.
Yeah, so I was trying to place it and think, oh gosh, okay, was this the same battle? Was this the same time? Because the whole, premise of the visualization is almost identical, where you see Anakin and Ahsoka, but Ahsoka obviously in the live action is dressed completely differently. And Ariana Greenblatt is, a little bit I wouldn't say that she's older necessarily, but I mean, you definitely get that same kind of vibe. But I just think it's really cool the way that they were able to, even though it's not the same scene necessarily, that they were able to recreate that.
Yeah, I feel like that scene from Ahsoka is kind of an amalgamation of
Mhm.
Geonosian battle scenes and a few other ones, but I think you're right. The direct influence for it is the Battle of Geonosis. And I can't
Yeah.
remember if they even talked about it being the Battle of Geonosis during the episode. They might have. I mean, they clearly represent the Battle of Mandalore, the Siege of Mandalore, in a later
Mhm.
scene in that episode there. But, uh, Anakin's wearing the same armor,
Right.
in both at that point. So,
And the
um,
colorization, like just of the sky and the
the oranges,
dust and yeah, the
yeah,
clay and everything is just spot on.
yeah. So well done by them. And of course, they
Yeah.
bring down a spire on top of the shield generator, and they've completed the mission. They end up back with Obi-Wan and Ki-Adi-Mundi, and they're getting ready to evacuate on a gunship. And as Ahsoka is kind of helping Obi-Wan to that gunship, um, Anakin is helping Obi-Wan. Ahsoka comes up and says, "Hey, what's your number?" And he's like, "Not now, Ahsoka." And she's like, "Oh, come on." And so he says, 55. And then she gets that big grin on her face and says 60. So, and he's like, "Well, it was my idea to call in the airstrikes. So, I win." And she says, "You're impossible." Just kind of an eye roll and a smile. I mean, this is not a serious competition. But then Ki-Adi-Mundi says 65.
So great.
Anakin's like, "What?" And he goes, "I had 65. What do I win?"
Right.
Anakin kind of blinks and thinks about it for a second. My everlasting respect, master. And then
Perfect.
Obi-Wan chimes in. It's like, that's not something he grants lightly. So you should be honored with that. But just kind of like I don't want to say crestfallen, the look on Ki-Adi-Mundi's face, like he's participating in something. And it's like,
Right.
oh, all I get is Anakin's respect.
It reminded me in that moment of, like, Captain America going, "I understood that reference." You know
Yeah.
what I mean? Just
It's just kind
wanted
of
to
like,
be
oh.
involved.
So yeah,
So
fantastic
good.
episode. I mean, I can't say enough good things about it. You have any other things you want to touch on before we wrap this up?
Well, again, it's just such an epic, episode and so legendary. But I also caught a couple other things. We were talking about like Numa on the side of, I think it was Waxer's helmet,
Hmm.
and then some of the other gunships that had some of the art on it. I just
Yeah.
love seeing those because, again, it's an homage to a lot of the World War II bombers and that type of thing, where you had the artwork on the side. And I know that like Ki-Adi-Mundi's had, I want to say it was like a clone trooper, but it looked like a skull on it with a
Hmm.
red outline. I thought that was really cool.
And one of the others had a Nexu on it, and in Arabic it said "Bad Kitty."
Love
Um,
it.
yeah.
Bad
So
kitty.
they did a good job with those.
Perfect.
Okay, well then that will do it for this discussion of Landing a Point Rain on this episode of Podcast Stardust. Thank you all for joining us. We hope you did. We're going to be continuing to cover the Clone Wars for the next few weeks until Andor Season 2 rolls around. Then we'll take a break from our rewatch to discuss that. But hey, if you want to make sure you get our future discussions of the Clone Wars during this rewatch, make sure you've subscribed and on your podcatcher choice. And once you've done that, if you'd be so kind as to rate, review the show, that would really help us out on whatever podcatcher you're using. Those types of things that drives the algorithms and helps others find the show beyond your word of mouth, which we're always appreciative for. And if you want to catch more episodes of the show beyond the 1 or 200 that are likely to be on your podcatcher, head over to directorzapp.com. You can find all previous 866 episodes along with some other great podcasts such as Brews and Blasters, Animaniacast, Dork Lair, Enjoy Stuff, Love, Death, and Robots Plus, Warp Trails, and then all the shows that Jay and Josh are doing, including Enjoy Stuff, Agent Shield's Case Files, and the Superhero Suite. Jay, we are on lots of places on the internet. Do you want to remind everybody what those are?
Yeah, absolutely. So we are most conveniently on your socials on Facebook and Instagram at Podcast Stardust. And we are, as Dennis said, literally everywhere. So, I mean, we're on everything from Spotify. We have 2 YouTube outlets. So we have our traditional YouTube as well as YouTube Music, where you can head over to all of those, like, subscribe, rate us, and, leave some interactions for us as well in comments. And we're also on Audible. So literally everywhere that you find podcasts, we are there, and we'd love it if you would share it with your friends. And we also have some Pinterest pages. So if you're looking for some fun Star Wars-esque ideas, you can head over there. And then we also have our TeePublic store. So if you are in need of some new swag or a closet refresh, you can head over to the link in our show notes, and you can pick from one of 7 different show logo designs that are available on all kinds of fun things, from apparel to home goods and everything in between. So once again, the link to that is in our show notes.
All right, Jay, you want to go ahead and remind everybody what you got going on in cosplay?
Of course. So I just recapped my experiences at Fan Expo Cleveland on our news episode, but I had a great time there, and you can catch all the fun on my Instagram, which is at j.snipscosplay. And I will be ramping up for May the 4th here before too long. But until then, you can catch me as Ahsoka, 2 different versions of Hera, the 4th sister, my original concept Mandalorian based on Tahiri Vela from Legends, as well as some other Star Wars characters, including Leia, and some other non-Star Wars characters as well. So once again, catch all the fun at j.snipscosplay.
Okay, coming up on the show on Wednesday, we'll be talking about The Edge of Balance Volume 3, which is the latest manga from the High Republic. And then on Friday, we are wrapping up the week with a look at Star Wars news. So with that, thanks for listening to episode 867, the Podcast Stardust, everyone. Have a great week, and until next time, may the Force be with you.